So we're going to talk about Two-Headed Giant Commander and maybe why people should be playing Two-Headed Giant Commander as opposed to Free-For-All Commander. What even is Two-Headed Giant?
It's a good question. We just spent the last 3 hours trying to figure it out ourselves.
So we're going to talk about what Two-Headed Giant is, how it sort of changes the rules of Commander, the pros and cons of playing that system versus playing Free-For-All Commander, and then maybe some, kind of takeaways of like, if this was the main way that the format was played, what would that mean for the game?
Distraction makers.
So before we get too deep in the woods, Two-Headed Giant is a 2v2 format where each player brings their own deck to the table, but they are on team of 2 against another team of 2 other players with their own separate decks. So the primary differences here are that each team starts with 60 life and it is a shared life pool. Players play simultaneously. A team loses when they take 21 or more commander damage from a single commander, have 15 or more poison counters, or when either player on the team is unable to draw a card from their deck.
We talked about the free mulligan in Commander. Free mulligan is actually a multiplayer rule, apparently, so you'll get a free mulligan. Then the team that goes first will not draw a card. You go through your turn steps in the same sequence you normally would. You would untap, upkeep, draw. You and your teammate do that simultaneously. Then you may each play a land. That works simultaneously as well because it doesn't use the stack. And then once one of you goes to cast a spell, you sort of enter back into normal active player, non-active player, in this case, active team, non-active team. But that's sort of how the simultaneous turn works, is that basically anything that doesn't use the stack, you do simultaneously. Anything that would use the stack, it resolves pretty much the same way that it normally does in Commander anyway. The way that combat works is that you both attack simultaneously, and then the opposing team blocks simultaneously. You just attack the other team. There isn't like individual players that you're attacking, and anybody can block anything as well. So you're just sort of attacking together. That's why there's one shared life total, and then combat resolves like normal. Some other little edge case weirdness is that it is treated as though there are 4 players at the table, even though you're on a team of 2. So if a card says target player, you're targeting one of the other 3 players at the table. If it says target opponent, you're targeting one of the 2 opponents that you have. If something says all players gain something, specifically something like poison counters, for instance, if all players gain a poison counter, then each team would get 2 poison counters because there's 2 players on a team. I might have missed some of the nuances here, but if you want more direct information about how to play the format specifically, there'll be links in the description. Okay, so let's get into some of the pros of playing this format over Free-For-All Commander.
The main pro is no politics.
Yay!
Yay! Now, this is the problem. Commander players love politics.
Do they?
I think a lot of people do like politics.
Do they really,
yes.
though?
I think there's a reason that Munchkin keeps getting printed every year, and it's the politic game. And the problem is that there's a lot of baggage that comes with politics that we talked about endlessly on this channel, and we will talk about it more on this video.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest issue with politics is that the politics game can override the game of Magic, and that in certain instances, your ability to play the politics game, for instance, is all that would matter, right? So it doesn't really matter how good or bad you are at Magic. You can use the politics game to sort of level the playing field, which does make the game more casual theoretically. But the biggest issue here is that it simplifies the game down to essentially just what the politics game is.
In this case, you're back in parity. There's no reason really to politic because you can't say, hey, don't go after me, go after this guy. There's no other guy to go for.
That's the biggest thing, right? Is that you have Team A and Team B. There is no Team C. There's no alternative choice to who you're attacking or who you're targeting. There is a bit of nuance between am I targeting this player or that player, but they are both my opponent. So I don't really have to worry about them discussing which of them I should be targeting because theoretically as a team, those things affect both of them.
It being an orthogonal game also ends up solving quite a few other issues.
If we can hone in on one major issue that is solved by playing it in a two-headed giant format instead, it really is this idea that the strategy circle starts to become relevant again. Because when you're in a 3v1 environment, it becomes very difficult for you to overcome the overwhelming odds of going up against 3 players simultaneously.
At least based off of Magic's existing card pool, because the card pool was not designed with that intention.
Right, and the cards that do work in that environment are very narrow, right? And that's why we get a lot of undesirable play patterns and things that just win the game outright. Like, okay, well, it's pretty difficult for me to beat 3 other players, so instead I'm just going to beat all players simultaneously, and that's why we end up with things like Thassa's Oracle, Demonic Consultation, that kind of stuff, which the format tries to police out, but like it's still all there somewhere, right? It's not like Thassa's Oracle, Demonic Consultation is the only combo that does this, right? So when you move into two-headed giant territory, now it really is, 2v2 in that you have someone backing you up when you're going for these win attempts, and things like aggro become viable again because you're able to get enough resources onto the board between the two of you to get through the other just 2 players, right? And there's 1 life total to affect. So I think that's really the biggest solve here, right, is that we start to reestablish what the strategy circle is designed to do, which is make sure that there's counterplay to different strategies.
Stuff like the bystander problem, which is that if 2 people are going at it, you can just sit by and not interact. That's just a strategy that sort of comes out of a free-for-all type of a game in this way. And similar to kingmaking. Kingmaking is just a natural outcome when you have a free-for-all experience, as long as you can have any sort of direct interaction. Any free-for-all game is going to have some level of kingmaking. This does stop that from existing, but kingmaking isn't inherently its own like bad thing as much as it's sort of just like a cursed issue to try and solve for.
It's a dynamic, right?
Yeah.
It's that when you have a certain rule set and a situation that is created where you can have 2 players going against each other and a 3rd player standing by, right, bystanding and waiting to see what happens, and then choosing who of that interaction is going to win. Where here, since you have 2v2, if you're choosing that your teammate will win, you are also winning. So you are incentivized to do that, right? Is that it's now we win and not I'm going to pick either you or you and decide who is going to win the game.
One of the biggest pros of this is that it has all of the same balance that 1v1 has, right? Not exactly how the game intended it to be, because obviously a lot of numbers are different. Suddenly you can have decks function in a different way than planned initially than with 1v1. But you get a closer level of balance to 1v1, but with multiplayer, which is the biggest reason why people like playing Commander, is it's not just the politicking. Most of the time it's the socializing, and that aspect just is enhanced when you can have more of your friends going and engaging in the game together.
The other thing that's interesting about the pressure that is applied to strategies when you're operating in a 3v1 environment is that it forces non-interaction, right? You are incentivized to focus on building your own economy, like focusing on cards that are reinvesting in your own thing and not affecting other players because of these 3v1 dynamics, right? If you start pushing out against other players, all 3 of them can team up and come back against you. And so each player is sort of incentivized to focus on their own stuff, where if you're in a 2v2 environment, that situation just cannot happen, right? Like you are, anything that you are doing is affecting exactly your only opponent, whether it's a singular person or the other team.
Kind of talked about how what this ends up sort of incentivizing is everything moves closer and closer towards this battlecruiser sort of a gameplay, and in free-for-all. And even at a CEDH level is that it's basically battlecruiser, but it's playing the combo game as opposed to playing giant creatures on the board. And what's funny is that, like, I think in a sense, battlecruiser, if you play any sort of like new player game of something like StarCraft, everyone's just kind of bunkered into their base. They're building up all their battlecruisers, and then they're going and smashing them into each other. Like, it is kind of a new player friendly-ish experience because they're not getting this constant threat that's bombarding them, forcing them to have to respond right then and there. However, I think that this format, Two-Headed Giant, kind of gets around that, because if you have a new player that's sitting at your pod or at your group, you can immediately be on a team with them and help them look through their hand, show them what actions might be optimal. And whenever I've had a new friend come into the game, we tend to usually try to do some sort of a Two-Headed Giant type of a game mode to try and show them the ropes.
It's a way to like maintain sort of the game without having to subvert what you're supposed to be doing like you would have to in a free-for-all setting. I'm not supposed to be looking at what you're going to do, but let me see your hand, let me help guide you through it, but it's against like what we're supposed to be doing here. Where Two-Headed Giant, it's like this is exactly what we're supposed to be doing, is we are supposed to be looking at each other's hands, talking things through as a team, and doing those things.
All right, so let's talk about the bad things.
Yeah, because, systems always have sort of unintended consequences or weird nuances that come up.
Magic has mana screw.
Sure. Yeah.
Whether you like it or not.
It's there.
It's there.
But, it's integral to how the system functions. So, in this sort of two-headed giant, two-player mode, it has the same kind of baggage that any kind of cooperative game might have, in that there's this thing called quarterbacking, or alpha nerding, as some people call it. Steamrolling, as we've called it, which basically just means that if one player has a very dominant personality and a very clear, picture of what you should be doing to win the game, they can sort of force you to do that, potentially against what you want to do.
I mean, we just talked about in the pros that it's new player friendly because you can have someone show you the ropes and tell you what is an optimal play. That is also its greatest strength is its greatest weakness, which is that, someone else can tell you when you're doing things wrong. What's interesting is that we were just seeing this in the rules, is that there is actually sort of a fix for this. Not really.
I don't know if it's a fix. It's more like, well, what do you do if you can't decide what to do?
Right.
We need some kind of edge case ruling for that. Which they have.
And so the player that is on the rightmost seat is what's called the priority player. And so they get all final decisions.
Sort of your team captain, I guess. Yeah.
That at its worst means that the person on the left might not even actually play.
And especially because this doesn't ever move, right? It's like that player is designated at the start of the game based on where they're sitting at the table, and that's it. There's no passing of that responsibility. So there's a lot that comes down, especially in a competitive environment where, all right, well, whatever that person decides happens is what we're going to be doing, which is a little weird. I don't know.
It is a little weird. It is the biggest con, unfortunately, of the format. Now, that being said, is that a bigger con than politicking? Politicking, well, you still get to decide, you still have the freedom of your own actions, and in doing so, you can do fun, crazy, wild stuff. If you have someone that wants to be a little bit more chaotic and do something dumb, but they think is fun, they can do that in Commander, but they probably can't do that in something like Two-Headed Giant, because their teammate will say, hey, no, that's not what we're doing.
A lot of that comes down to like team dynamic gameplay, right? Like team play comes with that kind of a baggage, right? Where you can look at something like League of Legends, right? And if somebody on your team's not pulling your weight, then you identify them very quickly as like they're the problem. They are keeping you from winning. In Commander, sometimes in this free-for-all environment, you can look at like what a different player is doing, and you're kind of like, well, they're kind of like not having a good game. Their strategy's not really coming together, but that doesn't really affect me, right? My strategy can come together. But when you start to get to higher levels of the format in Commander and free-for-all environments, one player at the table not pulling their weight has an effect on everybody else at the table because of those 3v1 dynamics, right? I think one way to think about free-for-all is a dynamic 3v1 environment where the person who's trying to win the game is the one, and then the other team is the three people stopping them from winning the game. So if one player isn't pulling their weight in that instance, they're on the non-winning team, right, in that moment, that affects the ability of that one person to win, because now you have to only beat two players, right? Where same dynamics kind of emerge in this two-headed giant situation, where if your teammate doesn't have it coming together for whatever reason, that directly affects you.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because in the same way that we're talking about this format's greatest strength being its greatest weakness, same thing can be said with that if in a free-for-all game, its greatest strength is politicking, then this format not having that suddenly means that when it's brought into comparison, politicking and the benefits that you get out of politicking are not there. And so one of the benefits would be that, like you're saying, someone in a free-for-all game actually might still have a fighting chance, even if they are a newer player or a worse player than the players at the table. Because they can utilize the politicking game in their favor.
They can be that bystander that's just like, oh, don't attack me. I've got nothing going on yet. And they might actually have nothing going on. And then there's other people to focus on.
In this case, though, your teammate is just worse. And you go, well, fuck you.
Guess we lose.
Get off my team.
Another sort of drawback here is that if you're going to go to an event, you probably or you might need a teammate. If it's an event that is organized for people to come as a team, then you're at a huge disadvantage if you show up without a team and sort of team up with somebody at the event. And that could be difficult. It could just be difficult because it's not just you by yourself with your own agency going to an event. Sometimes it's just hard to get schedules to line up. Who knows, right? Where in a free-for-all Commander environment, it does maintain that individual sort of agency in that you as an individual go to the event and then are teamed up into pods of 4 to play the game. You don't have to like bring a friend with you every time.
What's interesting is I actually wonder if this might be a good smooth transition into our next topic, which is that what are the actual implications for if this format were to become more popular? Let's say Wizards starts officially sanctioning these tournaments and really is pushing for this particular format to be the tournament viable way of playing Commander. And one way that I think that might not be as effective is I don't know if people resonate as well with teams. A lot of people, even in team-based sports or games, tend to center around this particular player that is like the hero player. It's the LeBron James, it's the Michael Jordan, it's the person that carries the team in that way because of their skill level. The same thing happens with League of Legends all the time in Dota. And this is so reliant on this team that you don't really know who actually is more skilled or less skilled in this case. More than likely, if it were some sort of a recorded tournament, you're just going to be watching two guys sort of going and whispering to each other and then finally playing their cards out after 5 minutes. And it's hard to tell. It at that point doesn't really feel like you're watching this individual person as much as just this. Oh, it's Team USA, I guess. I don't know, versus France.
They have done tournaments like this, right?
Oh, okay.
I don't know if they've always been two-headed giant, but they've done team tournaments like that where you're accumulating points together as a team and things. Like there's Team USA versus Team Japan or whatever. Like they've done that tournaments like this before. I do think that there is an advantage to a team in two-headed giant if both players are equally skilled at the game versus another team where one player is very skilled and the other one's less skilled, right? So we would at least see it expressed there, theoretically. But you're right in that there's sort of this cloudiness of like, okay, well, who's the actual best player here? But also the point that you made me think of was that this does incentivize a lot of deliberation in a similar way to Commander does, right? We see this dynamic emerge where, that 3v1 thing I'm talking about, where you have three people discussing between them. Suddenly they're on a dynamic team and they're discussing how to beat this one other player. And they could talk through all of the different, ways they could get each other to draw cards and who's got counterspells and who's got this and how can we most effectively beat that one other player. Here, it's the same thing happens. It's just two players, but it's two players discussing a lot before anything happens.
And I think that what's funny is that as much as I think some of the 3v1 can get pretty out of hand as far as the politicking and conversations go, that is also some of the most exciting stuff about the game is people that are trying to make deals, don't want to make deals, tell other people, priority bully someone else to do something in order for them to play a counterspell or something. That's interesting because it is more cutthroat. But yeah, it's a lot less exciting seeing two people, even if you were hearing what they're talking about, it's essentially just them putting their hands together and probably going, well, I could put that first or that, or you could do that and that, but they might have that. Yeah. And it's just not that exciting to go and watch. And yeah, it would be a longer turn on average than your average Magic tournament.
Does this make for as good of content, right? And that's something that we know about Commander, is that one of the reasons why it has been so successful on YouTube is that it makes for particularly good content. It makes for good drama, right? You have backstabbing and somebody drew this spell or this did that thing and they sort of, upset that other person. What are they going to do to get back? It's it's built for almost reality TV in a way, right? Where two-headed giant, like you said, there might be deliberation, but there's not going to be all that dynamically shifting alliances thing that happens.
And it's deliberation that you would prefer to be quiet.
Yes.
Ideally,
because you don't want your opponent to know.
Because you don't want your opponents to know. But in a 3v1, you have to deliberate openly, and so that again is still some of the most exciting stuff in Commander.
There's also some interesting implications for some of the most powerful cards in Commander, stuff like Rhystic Study, stuff like Smothering Tithe. So because there's still 4 people at the table that are acting sort of as individual players, they both draw cards and things. So Rhystic Study gets a nerf, right? Because you only have 2 opponents that it's triggering off of. The same thing for Smothering Tithe, except the difference here is that they draw cards simultaneously. So theoretically, if your opponents needed to untap, draw, you would get 2 triggers off your Smothering Tithe before one of your opponents could deal with it, versus in a free-for-all game, you would only have one opponent that drew a card and then if they dealt with it immediately, then that would be the end of it. Really edge case, but it's something of note.
I think the other thing to consider is that in a free-for-all game, if I play Smothering Tithe, there's 3 opponent's turns before it gets back around to me. That is 3 opportunities for someone to take care of the Smothering Tithe. In this case, it's 1 turn for either one of those 2 players to do something about it, and then I'm immediately back to a position that I can use the value that I generated from the card, as opposed to having to wait for these 3 potential turns. You also know that is the turn, that is the only turn I need to keep mana up for. Where in Commander, sometimes you might debate on whether or not you want to spend your mana now or on someone else's turn for protection or, whatever else.
This feels kind of like a bit of a pro in that you're going to get more turns more quickly, which is nice, but
that's true.
Still,
right.
Yeah.
But if the turns are longer, is that an okay trade-off?
Yeah. The only other thing of note here that we were thinking about with cards, right? Because you have cards that say each opponent, which again, you have two individual opponents on one team that is your opponent. So you still get if it's like each opponent, it would be your 2 opponents, right? You still have 2 rather than 1. But then cards that say each player are actually kind of interesting too. Like the card Innocent Blood is the one that came to mind, which is each player sacrifices a creature for 1 black mana. In Commander, I think that card is more powerful. In free-for-all Commander, that card is more powerful because you have 3 opponents, right? So it says each player. Well, 3 of those players are your opponents. Where here, it says each player, 1 of those players is your teammate. So there is a bit of a shift in how you would evaluate cards for this format, which I think is, it is a unique dynamic. It is interesting for this rule set. I think it's kind of cool, but something just to note, I guess.
Yeah, I think that it'll be interesting. It would be interesting to see how the metagame would shift. If this were given enough attention, just what types of decks would come out of it would be significantly different than any other Commander format deck that we'd see, because players can combine the decks uniquely together. And with the return of the strategy circle, because we're reaching more of that parity orthogonal game structure, it means that we're going to see a variety of strategies come out of these decks, or every deck combo is just going to equal tempo. I don't know.
Right, because we just talked about that dynamic a little bit, where sure, one player could play all aggressive stuff, one player could play all defensive stuff, and that way okay, well, if my opponents are trying to stop the aggressive player, I can stop them from stopping them. And I've built my deck in a way that I know it's all interaction, and my teammate's deck is all gas. It's all stuff that wins the game. And it's interesting. I don't know if that's just ultimately the best strategy to it. Because of the way that the systems work, you don't have to put all those things in one deck, which is particularly strong. Cool. So, what are takeaways here? Final thoughts. Wrap it up.
I think it's interesting. I think Wizards would probably like it if a more orthogonal structured format using Commander cards and the Commander title, I guess, would take over, and that more people would be interested in it. And I think Wizards right now is going to try their best to find some way of making that work, and Two-Headed Giant might have been their most recent sort of experiment with Magic-Con Vegas to see how an actual sealed event using Commander Two-Headed Giant worked and whether people were interested. I'm skeptical because even though I think a lot of the pros of it definitely outweigh some of the cons of free-for-all Commander, I still think some of the cons of the format would go away essentially if it were just 1v1 still. And 1v1 with Commander decks and cards would probably still do okay in comparison.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's funny because when we went into this topic, I was thinking, this is the solution, right? This is how you get multiplayer games that are still they're sort of tournament viable, right? And then after we discussed it, I'm actually like, I don't even know if this works. I don't think this fixes it either, right? Because
it fixes some things,
but it trades some problems for just other multiplayer problems. And so I think. Without Magic, without a game systems being built for multiplayer from the ground up, I kind of think that it's a 1v1 game. And if, you're playing to the extremes of the system, stapling anything on top of that system that was initially built for 1v1, I think just creates dynamics that were never accounted for within the initial systems.
And I think what's funny is that to me, actually, I think the biggest negative to this is that it becomes much harder to watch. And right now, they need to try and have competitive play be as close to the level of excitement as casual Commander on YouTube. And
good luck.
Yeah, like they're never going to reach that, but
well, it's also like you're trying to get emergent like interest out of the systems when you're playing competitively like that versus manufactured interest that can be dramatized from command. So you're just never going to.
You're never going to get it.
You're never going to get it
because people that are filming on YouTube have the opportunity to plan in a way to make it as exciting as possible. But yeah, not every tournament's going to be that.
Yep. All right. Well, I guess that's it.
We're fucked.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed listening to us talk about Two-Headed Giant, please feel free to give us a little like and a subscribe, maybe a comment down below, maybe two, because of Two-Headed Giant.
Let's see what you did there.
Yeah.
Also, if you want to continue the conversation, you can join our Discord. The link is in the description below. Thanks for watching. We will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.